Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and Twitter and answer them here in video format. A lot of questions to answer after the Browns' first preseason game because you guys had a ton of questions afterwards. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to jump right into it. And the first question is going to be from Sammy Football, who says, let's say our third string quarterback continues to play well, Kyle Luetta. Could you see the Browns cutting Keenum and having that extra money possibly go towards Wyatt Teller? Short answer is no. And the reason for that is simply economics at this point when it comes to the salary cap. If you're talking about cutting Case Keenum this year, not going to happen. Case Keenum has like a $7 or $8 million dead cap money number. And he has a $6 million salary. What does that mean? It would literally cost the Browns more salary cap space to cut Case Keenum than it would to keep Case Keenum, right? Like, only if he became some kind of like locker room malcontent would you be justified in cutting him, because it just doesn't benefit the team in any real way if you do. So this year, he's as good as guaranteed as far as his status on this roster goes. He's going to make the team. They can't cut him. Maybe trade him, but come on, you're not going to trade Case Keenum at this point in his career, because who's going to trade for him? But you know, as far as the year after, right, in 2022, they can get out of that, only take $1 million dead cap hit. If that's how they want to go, if that's the direction they want to go, to free up some money for a Wyatt Teller down the line, you know, you could free up about $5 or $6 million that way. And, you know, the more Baker proves himself, the less useful Case Keenum is, and the less Case Keenum's role on this team becomes necessary, right? Then you can, you know, fill that backup role with whatever journeyman you want to get or whatever backup you want to get that won't break the bank. Because, you know, when Case Keenum was brought in, he was kind of an insurance policy. Hey, look, we don't know what Baker's going to be. He had one good year, one bad year. We got to see what the deal is with him. You found out in 2020 he can have another good year. If he has another good year this year, that's going to be the you're going to have that option to get rid of Case Keenum without it affecting your cap too much at the end of this season. And, you know, if all things go well with Baker Mayfield, I would see no reason why they wouldn't move on from Case Keenum there, especially when they have so many guys they need to re-sign coming up in the next offseason. So that's kind of the long way around on answering that question, but I hope that was a very thorough answer for you. Next question comes from Gabe, who says, with the emergence of Donovan Peoples-Jones, what do you see Hollywood Higgins' roles being? I don't think Donovan Peoples-Jones and his emergence really affects Hollywood Higgins' role. One, they're compatible. You can have one out there with the other, and they don't really bump heads or really affect each other. The person that's role is probably going to be taken up by Donovan Peoples-Jones is Kadero Hodge, and people might not think that's a sizable enough role for Donovan Peoples-Jones, but that's just a role that's going to be available for him this season. Odell is going to be here still. Jarvis Landry is going to be here, and I know some people are trying to push this idea that, oh, Donovan Peoples-Jones is ready now, you could just trade Odell. As I have stated many times before, trading Odell right now would make no sense, mainly because, you know, if you're talking about the salary cap, his deal is a bargain. $13 million for a top-end wide receiver, that's a bargain. It's an absolute bargain. The only person that Donovan Peoples-Jones, he can take their role of is Jarvis Landry. I don't think he's ready to do that yet. Maybe next year or the year after when Jarvis Landry's deal is up. But as of right now, I think he's really just going to take that Kadero Hodge role, and maybe they can expand upon that in some ways, or use him as a decoy or use Odell as a decoy to get him the ball. Either way, I think he's going to have that level of role this year. This next question comes from, hey, it's Mika, who says, do you feel Felton could have a future making a full transition to slot wide receiver? I feel like he could learn a lot from Jarvis. I think he's already making that transition now. We'll see how the rest of the preseason goes, but he didn't take any snaps from running back. So that kind of tells me they don't really see him as a running back, or they don't really care how well he runs at this point. They want to use him as a receiver. I think he's going to be a slash player, a special package player, and somebody who, we know Kevin Stefanski loves his gadget plays. We know he loves to kind of work these kind of trick plays in there, and Demetric Felton's a really intriguing person to use on those kind of plays. Next question comes from David Nelson, who says, early on in camp, we have seen Donovan Peoples-Jones have a strong connection with Baker Mayfield. If that rolls over into the regular season and beyond, what do you see his ceiling being? Obviously, he's an extremely talented guy, but he can be something special in the Stefanski offense. I think his ceiling might be something like a Stephon Diggs. I think that's probably his ceiling. Not super fast, but fast enough. Not super crisp, but crisp enough. Has really good athleticism and really good dexterity to kind of get some of those circus catches. So I think that's probably his ceiling. Another guy who was a late round wide receiver who ended up being a really good wide receiver down the line, which is kind of starting to become a trend in a lot of these drafts. The best wide receivers are typically not taken in the first round. Something to watch in the future. Yeah, but I think that's somewhere around where his ceiling is. I think Stephon Diggs is a good comp for him. The next question comes from W. Mike, who says, Q, seeing Takitaki in there late in the preseason game was a head scratcher. Do you think this was depth related, or was he potentially rotating late as the green dot? Do you think he's on their bubble? It was weird when I saw that, but then maybe since I haven't, preseason hasn't been here for like a year, I kind of forgot some of the trends that you normally see. It's not uncommon to see like a starting linebacker out there in the fourth quarter for whatever reason. It's not just the Browns that do it. I was watching the Ravens preseason game, and they had LJ Fort out there in the fourth quarter. We know LJ Fort starts for them. So I don't know. Like, maybe it might be a green dot thing. It might be something logistical just to make sure everybody can be where they're at. It might just be hey, Takitaki's going to be out there for like 90% of snaps. He's never done that before, so let's get him conditioned in the preseason. I don't know. But I remember Christian Kirksey used to be out there in the fourth quarter sometimes. They do weird things with that linebacker position. I think there's probably a good reason for it that coaches do that. That's weird, but it's also common, as weird as it sounds. The next question comes from Tilted, who says, how about that performance by Richard LeCounte? Do you see him emerging as someone who can be a major contributor on this defense? Not this year. Maybe on special teams, right? But not this year, because Ron Harrison's still here. Grant Delpit. Like, it's a crowded room right now, especially with John Johnson, all the things that he does. What I do think Richard LeCounte is going to be is if he can perform and continue to perform, it kind of gives you a backup plan if you can't get a good deal with Ronnie Harrison, right? Like, if you can't come to terms on a good deal with him, okay, you got Richard LeCounte. You got a young guy waiting in the wings to kind of take over that spot, so you can rotate in and out. And again, look, as we move out of this prime window that the Browns have built themselves into, we're going to start to have to think about things of how can you get, equal to or relatively just as good play as a player who might be a little expensive going into free agency. How can you replace that with a draft pick? That's going to be the game going forward with names like Ronnie Harrison or Malik Jackson. You're going to want to see guys underneath them that can eventually take over. That's how you make sure you can extend your playing window as long as you need it to be in order to hopefully win a Super Bowl. The next question comes from Soul Train, who says, what player's stock both negatively or positively was impacted the most after the first preseason game? I didn't notice it while I watched it the first time, but I gave a second viewing to the preseason game. Andrew Billings did not have a great day in run defense. That's concerning. But I'm willing to chalk that up to he hasn't played real football in a year, right? Like that just might have an effect on him. So I want to see how he continues in the preseason. But his stock was a little bit affected by that. I don't think anybody else really had their stock moved up or down a great deal. If you check out some of the stuff they do at Browns OBR with some of the film breakdowns they do, they pointed out something to me that Michael Dunn, he had a fantastic camp. He's having a fantastic preseason. So maybe his stock jumped up. And then obviously, we can talk about JOK stock jumping up, even though I think his stock was still high. And then like Demetric Felton, I think his stock jumped up a great deal. The next question comes from #1 Guardians fan who says, hey, why do you think JOK was taking third team snaps? He looks far and away better than every other linebacker on the team. Man, this is common. This is common, right? With young players, even if you expect them to play week 1, you're probably going to start them out on third team and then have them work themselves up, right? One, it's how you can maneuver things politically with the locker room. It doesn't feel like you're just taking a spot away from somebody. It feels like they're earning it. And also, he missed 10 days of camp. He was working himself back in, and you wanted to get him in a game where he can get himself conditioned, get himself in game condition where you can get an extended look at him in full contact. So I wouldn't be concerned about him being third string. He might be third string all preseason. He probably won't, but he might just end up playing third string all preseason. And then the games start in his first team. Since he is a high valued second round pick, he's obviously going to make the team. So they kind of know what he can do. They have an ideal of how they want to use him in his first year. I think you're going to see plenty of JOK come week 1, and I think the coaching staff knows that. The third string thing there is more of a logistic thing, or just more of what they want to see out of him right now after, missing 10 days of camp. But that's it for this week's Q&A. Again, guys, thank you for asking these questions. Have a great day. Have a good night.